Let's stop right here and look at this. The Gospel writers record 10 appearances of the risen Lord. 5 occur on the first Sunday, and 5 occur later on. Those that took place on the first Easter Sunday are Jesus' appearance to Mary Magdalene, to the other women, to Simon Peter, then to Cleopas and his companion on the road to Emmaus, and then to all of the disciples except Thomas. All of these resurrection appearances took place in Jerusalem except the one on the road to Emmaus. The 5 later appearances include Jesus' appearance to the whole number of disciples when Thomas was present 1 week later, his appearance to the 7 disciples by the Sea of Galilee, to over 500 people on a mountain in Galilee, to James in Jerusalem, and then to the disciples the last time in Jerusalem and on Olivet. Thus there are 2 appearances in Galilee and the rest apparently in Jerusalem and vicinity. The ascension takes place at the end of 40 days in Bethany at the Mount of Olives near Jerusalem. Now Mr. Nayland says the writers made a mistake in recording the number of disciples who saw Jesus. Matthew says the 11 proceeded to Galilee. Mark says Jesus appeared to the 11. Luke states, gathered together were the 11 and those who were with them. John merely states the disciples were present. Well, up to this point, none of the 4 writers disagree. But a few verses later, John records these words. But Thomas, one of the 12, called Didymus, was not with them when Jesus came. Now, 3 things need to be mentioned here. First, John doesn't say the apostles numbered 12 men when Jesus appeared. He simply says the disciples were present. Second, John shows us he uses the words the 12 to refer collectively to those members who were part of those called the 12, whether 10, 11, or 12 of the apostles were actually present. Proof of this is in John 20:24, where John identifies only 10 apostles while yet referring to them as the 12. As everyone knew, Judas was dead, and John states that Thomas wasn't present. This would mean 10 men were left, but John still refers to them collectively as the 12. Later, John describes 7 disciples at the Sea of Tiberias and refers to them only as the disciples. Now Luke refers both to the 11 and to the 12 to indicate the apostolic body collectively. Proof of this is in Acts chapter 2, where Luke refers to the 11, but in the passage itself we discover not only are the original 11 apostles present, but the newly elected apostle is also present, which would total 12 men. In Luke 24:33, Luke refers collectively to the 11 and then adds, there were others who were with them. In 1 Corinthians 15, Paul refers to the apostles collectively as the 12, just as John and Luke do. It is evident that Paul and John's use of the 12 and Luke's use of the 11 are ways of referring to the apostolic body collectively rather than exact numerical computations. Thus, there is no conflict between the writers describing how many disciples were present.
I think you have a real problem on the matter of the dating of the documents. You can't say simply that Mark was the first of the Gospels and Matthew and Luke come later and then John way later than that. That's one textual theory, but of course there are others. Goodspeed, for example, argued that Matthew had priority, and J.T. Robinson, a flaming liberal of the 1960s, finally came to the conclusion that the Gospel of John was actually the first Gospel. One thing is certain, all of these documents were in circulation within a generation of the events themselves. But it's not going to be possible, it seems to me, to establish such clean priorities in relation to the 4 Gospels that you can get rid of Thomas' statements as coming in a Gospel that was written considerably later than the rest. You're simply going to have to face the attribution of that incident to Thomas. You're going to have to explain it in some fashion.